Hello and welcome to the latest and greatest edition of Better Together Arizona. I am super excited to have Reyna and Jose from Aliento with me today, and we are going to get into the weeds on Prop 314. How are you both doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
Doing pretty well.
Our vision for creating the Royale was to create a space for the LGBTQ plus community and ally community. It's important to vote so that everybody has a seat at the table. Visit yourvoteisyourvoice.com and make sure that you're registered to vote today.
There are a remarkable number of ballot initiatives on the ballot this year. The ballot is actually 4 full pages long. And I think one of the most important propositions that people really need to understand and be educated on is Proposition 314. So this proposition is titled the Secure the Border Act, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think really my question in this conversation is, does this actually secure the border, or does this create potential harm for people that are here that may have been that may have come here undocumented at a younger age, but also does it create harm to the state and our reputation and like our ability to have a sustainable future? So that's my question about Prop 314. Reyna, can you talk about what this bill proposes to do?
Angela, thank you so much for having us here. And the answer is simple. No, it does not gonna secure the border. It's not gonna do anything to support Arizonans, including dreamers like me, but it also harms taxpayers.
Okay.
We don't have to imagine this. Unfortunately, we've been here before. We remember those days of SB 1070 and the harm, the reputational harm, the economic harm that it had in our communities here in Arizona. And as we're picturing and imagining a better Arizona for all of us, 314 does nothing to do that.
Right. So I do remember SB 1070. I remember the national boycott. Folks that think Proposition 314 is not the right way to really address comprehensive immigration reform are saying a couple things, right? Number one, that this is a federal issue and there is a bipartisan solution that needs to be addressed federally. And then it seems like one of the first places people are really going to is the real concern about economic harm. I think there are estimates of like $3.2 billion per year that Prop 314 would cost if it was implemented. Are those numbers right?
Jose, I know that you're a numbers person. So tell us a little bit about the numbers and then I can break it down from like the real impact of that.
Yeah, no. So there's the Grand Canyon Institute estimated cost about $325 million per year.
Okay.
There's also a cost that is to that number that increases based because we are already overpopulation of our jails. And people, if they get detained, they're going to be sent instead of detention centers, going to be sent to our jails. And that's going to cost more.
Okay.
And that's where it gets a little bit higher. We're also in a deficit, $1.3 billion deficit. It's a state. So meaning to fund this unfunded mandate, we would have to cut services from other places.
And this doesn't take into account as well the potential lawsuits, right? If you're calculating the lawsuit cost of that, because if there are going to be violations against the federal government, we already know that organizations, including Aliento, we're looking into potentially, hopefully knock on wood, this doesn't go into effect, but really challenge the constitutionality because even the way that the bill was written, they already said, hey, there's a challenge already in Texas, SB 4. This might be unconstitutional, and that would cost the state and the taxpayers of Arizona additional dollars.
Okay, so let's roll back for a second because there's so many layers to this Prop 314.
Yeah.
So number one, it's based on, I think it was HB2 in Texas, right?
SB4.
SB4. I'm sorry. So it's based on SB4 in Texas, which passed but has never been implemented because it is currently under litigation, and the belief is that it's not constitutional. So if that bill is not constitutional and this is based on a similar bill, then it seems obviously that this is going to go to the courts. So it costs taxpayers money there. Mm-hmm. It costs everyday Arizonans money if we cause real world reputational harm, right? It causes the cost, like as you were saying, Jose, of having overcrowded jails and just of enforcement. And then this has to be paid for, right? So to your point, we have a $1.3 billion deficit. Existing programs are currently being cut. And we would need to cut more existing programs to find the funding to pay for this.
Yeah, because when the Republicans passed it at the legislature, they were first adamant. They knew it was unconstitutional. They wanted to have the fight, specifically Senator John Hoffman. And then additionally is they didn't assign any money to it. So we have to get from general fund. And most likely what will be cut will be public education and childcare programs.
Two very important programs.
Yes.
Okay. So it's unfunded. It's likely unconstitutional. It can cause reputational harm. It causes real world harms to people that are living here, like folks like you, right? That came here as young children and are dreamers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because folks live in the shadows, right? It probably, does this overburden our police force, our security forces?
Yeah, we have had several sheriffs and police departments talk about how their job is they're already understaffed. And they are currently looking for more individuals. They're not going to add more funding to it. So therefore, they will have to shift the regular services that they provide to accommodate this. And a lot of them don't want to.
Yeah, I was listening to something, I was listening to a news article about Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and the fact that they're short 2,000 officers,
Yeah.
right? And so we don't have enough personnel as it is. This would take additional resources and additional funding that has not been earmarked in the current budget. So it will likely take money out of existing programs. Jose, you're saying childhood education.
Yeah, well, that's the program that typically gets cut the first.
Okay.
Which is really sad because we know the importance of education and childcare programs, especially for growing families and the cost of living here in Arizona. So this is going to impact working families, people who are having kids, our age, young kids, and it's devastating because it's going to negatively impact this community. It's going to force police officers to do something that they're not trained for and they don't want to do. And then it's going to attack a community that belongs to us, like my family, my cousins, and my parents.
And immigration reform is definitely needed. And this is a federal issue.
At the end of the day, it is a federal issue, and Arizona is going to bear the cost if the state is going to try to make an immigration law. We have seen that, and it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars. I think the other thing is, when we're talking about law enforcement, that I think it's really critical to say, a lot of the Latino community started losing faith in law enforcement, and they would not go up front and telling them about crimes that they were being victims of because they were afraid of getting deported.
So just less safety in our neighborhoods as well.
Correct.
Okay. That's a lot to unpack for Prop 314. And I really do want to talk about the reputational harm too. There's so much growth going on in our state. Maricopa County is one of the fastest growing counties in our nation. We have all this new business that's coming here. The reputational harm, and it took well over a decade after SB 1070, I think, for Arizona to get back on equal footing that was lost because of the national boycott that happened because of SB 1070. We have all this growth going on, and the reality is young people don't want to live in a state or in a region that is discriminatory, right? Inclusion and valuing everyone from diverse communities is really a top priority for young, talented workers, right? So we're at this kind of Y in the road where if you pass something like this that really has I don't see anything good coming from Prop 314, right? We can't, it's an unfunded mandate. It's likely unconstitutional. It's going to cause economic harm. It's going to cause reputational harm. It's going to encourage people not to come here. This could set us back for decades, literally.
And not only that, we were talking about the young workforce. Half of Gen Z are multiracial.
Yeah.
And how are you going to really find out whether a person came to the United States, specifically in Arizona? That's the way that 314 is crafted. They have to know if you came to Arizona through a legal port of entry. We're not even equipping law enforcement to do that well. How are they going to know? How are they going to make the distinction? Are we going to go back to the day where we had sheriff cars in front of schools? So then people would be starting asking questions if they had legal papers to be here. How are we going to be determining that? And those were the images that people remember. And that's why a lot of people decided not to do business in Arizona.
Right.
So it's not only harming families like mine that that we were making negotiations whether to go to the movie theaters, whether to go grocery shopping on one day, because we were worried that going to get groceries was going to lead to a potential deportation. That's the real trauma and the real pain that a lot of our U.S. citizen children are going to have to go through. I'm a dreamer. I wasn't born here, but my sister was.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 1 in 9 students in our K-12 system that are Arizona kids born in Arizona that have parents that are undocumented. But it's not only the impact on that. I've heard so many stories of U.S. citizens that were pulled over, that they were asked about their papers, and at the end of the day, they had this very awful experience. And who wants to make a home of a place that feels hostile?
And just a real world harm and trauma, right? Okay.
Yeah, off of that, it was doing a presentation at Mesa Community College on just Aliento as a whole, and we were talking about the story of racial profiling. And a couple of the students, well, they're in their mid-20s, were talking about stories of where they were going grocery shopping and they were pulled over, and how that felt. And then other ones where it's like, oh, my kids was there and they were pulled over as well, and were U.S. citizens. So a lot of it, we have seen that it's to determine somebody here in the state of Arizona, the history has been they have to look brown, right? We go back to 1996 from the Chandler raids when they did it, right? We go back to Sheriff George Pio and his raids. So it becomes very, very easily is how is this going to implement it? It's going to specifically target certain communities, certain neighborhoods, certain zip codes.
We're going to profile people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add about this proposed Proposition 314? I mean, there's nothing good that comes of this, clearly. And it's really damaging, and it can damage our Arizona communities and damage, I think, the future of our great state.
I want to warn people looking at this. I obviously am suggesting folks to vote no on 314 because what I've seen in my community for over a decade on this. However, if you're still doubtful about the impact, do your research. Don't be fooled by the description on your ballot, because how can you encompass these things? Has 4 different tentacles, as we discussed.
Mm-hmm.
It's so convoluted. But at the end of the day, I think that it's really utilizing fear tactics and selling something that is not.
It's purposely divisive, right? We're one community, right? And my concern always is, are we going to continue to divide in other communities, right? The immigrant communities, the LGBTQ plus communities. Are we going to continue to do this? Are we going to embrace, our common humanity and find a way forward together? And I feel like that's the crossroads that we're at as a state and a nation right now, right? Those are the really important questions in front of us. Reyna, you say do your homework, right? And so can you give a plug for Aliento and how people can get a hold of you all, or your website, and if they need more information and want to do a really deep dive on what Prop 314 could potentially do?
Yes, if you are curious in learning more, go to alientoac, like Arizona.org/votes. And you have a really easy click that you can find that information on Prop 314. We're also going to have it in Spanish. So if you have family members that feel more comfortable in Spanish, you can also do that plug.
Wonderful. Anything else I missed?
We're really counting on you. Arizona is counting on you to do the right thing, and the right thing to do is to vote no on 314 to keep families together and to keep our economic prosperous and to ensure that we have one Arizona that works for all of us.
One Arizona that works for all of us. I think we're going to leave it right there. We want to remind everybody this is a really, really long ballot. It is 4 full pages long. So we do encourage folks to start at the bottom, right?
Yes.
And go to yourvoteisyourvoice.com/issues to learn about Prop 314 and all of the issues on the ballot. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Angela.
For me personally, it's important to vote because my ancestors fought for the right to do so. It's important to vote because it's a way to stand up for something and stand up for what you believe in. Register and learn more at yourvoteisyourvoice.com.